Good afternoon, Sean here, Mountains Garage. My goal yesterday, which was Friday afternoon, was to get this block painted. And as usual, the old Chevy Orange fought me a little bit. Now I love Chevy Orange, but this particular brand that I get at the local hardware store has got it out for me. You can see it's not orange. It's early Saturday morning. And Friday afternoon, my goal was to paint the block. So I tapped all the holes, cut off the boss along the oil pan rail that had to go to clear my power steering rack, taped everything up, and started spraying it Chevy Orange. What a mess. You've heard the Christmas Eve story where one of these cans blew up on me. This time, I just bought this can the other day. I got a bag this time so it didn't roll off the seat. And this stuff's like water. I mean, it probably would work on something new, but all it did on this block was highlight all the imperfections. So I didn't get very far and realized Chevy Orange wasn't going to happen. Fortunately, I had a can of Duplicolor. I believe it is cast coat iron. And it goes on beautiful. It's almost like your powder coat. It just jumps right on there. It instantly looks good. It's a good match for a really rough looking block. Because this side of the block especially was really rusty, and that orange just made it really pop of how ugly it was. I also like the fact this has an old style paint valve that you can just turn the can upside down and spray it for 5 or 6 seconds, and clear lacquer comes out, a clear sealer. It cleans the nozzle. These new style nozzles, you flip them upside down, they just keep spraying paint. I'll take the old style any day. So I think from here on, it's going to be this brand. When you're taping stuff off and you have some fancy stuff to go around, I just run the tape right beyond it and just tap the edges with a little ball peen hammer and break the tape right off. So I'm going to put it on the engine stand and untape it. I just taped around the edge where the head gaskets go and just covered everything else with rags. I didn't get real fancy. I'm just glad I didn't wait for the Chevy Orange of a different brand to even dry. I just went ahead and started spraying this stuff over the top. Figured I had such a mess. The worst case, if it reacts, I'll just have to strip it all off. Fortunately, it went over and everything's happy. While it's in a great position to do so, I went ahead and buffed the paint off the transmission mounting flange. Found and cleaned up and installed a pair of dowel pins, and thank you, Chevy, for never changing the size of those. And tried to clean up where the orange wanted to bleed under everything. I'm glad I only painted the back of the block orange, but that stuff is creeping everywhere. So it wipes off pretty much. I gotta say, this gray stuff takes quite a bit to buff it off. I also went ahead and cleaned the threads out again. This isn't a tap, it's just a thread cleaner. I just use my little impact and run it in and out. As long as you start it straight, it does a nice job. It's really fast. Every hole. And eventually you get to the point where you're just tired of cleaning parts. So I laid the bearings in there. My brand new used bearings. I mean, they look fantastic. I've cleaned every hole in the crank. Time to start chucking it together. This has been my go-to for a few years now. I use it on pretty much everything. Bearings and rear ends, and I like the way it clings on. It always seems to be there if you have to take it back apart, up until the point you actually run it. Lube on the bearing surface, and in this case the thrust surface, is important. Equally important on the threads, but most important under the head, so that friction isn't going to skew your torque readings. ARP is real good about giving you the lube and telling you where to put it. Ellis main caps are kind of mysterious until you study them. They come marked, front to back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I go ahead and prick punch so I don't forget that faces rearward. And that's fine. So 1 through 4 face this direction. 5's the curve's going to face back this way. No big deal. When you go to install the lower main bearing shell, in number 1, it's got a notch in either side. So you can put the bearing either direction. I want them to all be the same, and I want them to be the way they came out. Reference number 2, that's where I'm putting my lock. When you get to number 5, the block is single notched, the cap is double, the curves face forward, and they have the number on the opposite side. But I can go by the old prick punch, so I don't have to remember, which way did that go? But I'll put my bearing lock on this side, closest to me. At the beginning of the process, I put the middle one in, number 3, which contains the thrust bearing, and just move the crankshaft back and forth a little bit. I don't go crazy with a hammer and all that stuff, and pry bars like some people do. With the lube, you could hardly tell it has any thrust end play, but it does. And then I just worked front to back. It doesn't matter. I just tighten them down. Actually, with 2 different sizes, I had a different size socket on each gun to make it easier. I start all the cross main bolts just to make sure they're going to fit. No reason why they wouldn't, but they're nice and loose. Then I'm going to go ahead and torque the mains, starting with the middle out. You can get out a book, but pretty much you just gotta keep making a bigger circle. I got to look up the spec. I think you go to 15 or 30 foot-pounds and then 80 degrees. I watched a guy recently had his iPhone taped to the torque wrench. In this case, I think he had just a regular ratchet. I think that's better when you're going in degrees. I don't think you need to be pulling on a torque wrench, but maybe it doesn't matter. I have this old torque angle meter. Does the same thing a compass would do, 360 degrees. You just mark it when you start and go whatever degrees it calls for, 80 or 90 degrees. I prefer aftermarket bolts like ARP because they don't torque to yield or stretch to tighten, whatever you want to call the style fastener, where you go in degrees. The first time I did that a long time ago, back in the 80s, I thought it was the strangest thing I ever did, but somebody smarter than me figured out what it needed. But the guy that thought to tape his iPhone on his torque wrench using the compass, that's pretty smart. Digital. Probably nicer than the angle meter I have. And after I torque the mains, I'll go back and put a tiny bit of sealer, clear sealer, under the head of each cross-bolted main. It looks like the factory had some red stuff on there. Just a little bit. For the next video, my pistons are clean and ready to go. Already on the connecting rods. All I have to do is gap the rings. I'm going to go 30-30. 28 to 30 is pretty normal. This is a 4-inch bore. One of the big ones before they started making bigger. And I want to give the cast pistons every chance they can have. The experts say the piston's fine. Strength-wise, it's just when the ring butts, it breaks it, and that's what happens unless you lean it out and torch it. So that's the 2 ways the pistons are going to die. My rear covers aren't clean yet, so I need to work on that. I did remove the rear one right on this stand like it is. I don't know if I'll pop the engine off and take the adapter off and put it on, or I want to fight with it here. We'll see. The seals come with a nice little plastic or nylon piece that goes over the end of the crank, and they slip on pretty decent. So we'll see about that. So in the next video, I'm going to be gapping rings and putting in the pistons. And then it's time to work on some heads. And adding to the mystery of the engine as far as what year it is, the main bearings are marked October 2001. So that kind of ruins my theory that it might be a 2000. I still don't know what year it is and probably never will. And I still don't care. So today's Saturday. Last Sunday morning I decided I was going to actually take this rusty piece of junk. Instead of just using it as a dummy motor in the 72 Nova, I'm going to put it in as a potentially running unit. I only have a few hours a day to work on it. I think we did all right. If you've been watching the videos, and I hope you have, sometimes plans change or go back to where they were. My copy of a sloppy Stage 2 turbo cam was supposed to be delivered today. FedEx had it in Pennsylvania at 3 a.m. this morning and still promised a Saturday afternoon delivery. I recently got a text in the last 20 minutes and now it's going to be here Monday. I'm thinking I'm going back to that plan. I just did some part shopping under the bench. I took a used timing chain, gear, oil pump and bolts off a 5.3 that's under there, and I got it soaking. I want this motor to be middle of the road junk, and I want to put my good stuff in a forged bottom end. So at this moment, Saturday, whatever time it is, that's the plan. That's the beauty of having no one to answer to. I can change my plans at will, other than you guys. But I hope you get some amusement out of the fact that sometimes I change my mind. If I'm doing work for other people, you don't always have that choice. By this, I can do anything I want. Having this with used bearings, even though they're brand new, I'm going to do excellent assembly procedure, the best that I know how. Whether the parts are good or not. I have 2 engines to assemble over there that are really nice. And we'll actually have to check things. And this isn't that. This is actually fun. Once I turned the corner and got the thing painted and untaped it today, it's fun from here forward for me. I can go find something, like the dowel pins, clean them up, put them on. I don't have to look for them anymore. They're in one place. Because everything here, it's the Johnny Cash mode. It's one piece at a time. I got to go find it somewhere and clean it up and nail it down. But again, from here on in, it's fun. So, you can quote me on this. I'm pretty well disciplined. I'm going to keep this 10 or 12 pounds of boost maximum, no more than 14. Whether they claim it 14, you almost doubled your horsepower. So if it makes 450, I'd be making 900. It's more than I need. So I can back that down some in theory. I mean, this theory is tested, I don't know how many times a day. You know, people throw around 1,000 horsepower like it's nothing, but for this, it's all turbo related. If you have 1,000 horsepower with a turbo, the engine's either going to expire or produce that. If everything else is right, fuel system, injectors, all that stuff. But so I'm pretty well disciplined, and if I don't need more than 700 or 800 horsepower, detuned, it should be okay. I'm going to build a better one that there won't be any limit on. Well, there's always a limit. LS is a great motor, but there's only 4 cylinder head bolts or studs per cylinder. The aftermarket blocks and heads put extra in there. I think they have 6. I know there's one hanging out the bottom. You can see it in a lot of pictures and a lot of videos. And I believe they put one inside too. So, like you do in a big block Chevy to get that extra cylinder head bolt. More clamping, the ability to hold more pressure without losing the head gasket. Anyway, that's the plan as of right now. I believe I'm going to call it a day. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff. And I will talk to you next time.